Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I ask you to kindly welcome our distinguished podium guests this evening, our honoree, Ms. Nancy Southern, and our keynote speaker, Minister François-Philippe Champagne. The CCA acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The CCA also acknowledges that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississauga of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississauga and the Chippewa bands. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ken Frankel. I'm president of the Canadian Council for the Americas, and I'm pleased to welcome you back to... Thank you very much. I'm pleased to recognize some distinguished friends in the government and diplomatic corps with us tonight. Obviously, Minister François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry of Canada, Michael Grant, Assistant Deputy Minister for the Americas, Ambassadors, Colombian Ambassador to Canada, Mr. Carlos Morales, Michael Gort, Canadian Ambassador to Chile, and Graham Clark, Canadian Ambassador to Mexico. Consuls General, Mr. Daniel Cadenazzi of Uruguay, Ms. Hazel Hernandez of El Salvador, Mr. Fernando Morales Godoy of Chile, Mr. Porfirio Muñoz Ledo of Mexico, and Ms. Grace Saurias Joseph of Guyana. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Now for the considerable debts of gratitude. We first acknowledge the supernatural efforts of Marta Blackwell, our Vice President, who put this event together in 5 weeks. Thank you, Marta. We want to acknowledge our Gala sponsors, Platinum RBC Capital and E&Y, Gold, BMO, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, Tech, and Teneo. Thank you all. We can clap for each of you. Silver, Aimco, BCG, Bennett Jones, Brookfield, Dentons, Eurasia Group, IBM, Scotiabank, Siemens Energy, and Siemens. And also, of course, we want to acknowledge our annual premium sponsors, Platinum, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and Scotiabank. And also at Gold, ATCO, BMO Capital Markets, Brookfield, CDPQ, Discovery Silver, Kinross, Lundin Mining, and Tech. Thanks to all of you. We are here today. The CCA's purpose has always been to create a Canadian forum that serves both as a public good and a private good. Our bet has always been that our public and private initiatives, if done with integrity, would nourish each other rather than create tensions between them. And because we do not receive government or foundation funding, and because of the ethic and commitment of our premium members, we have the freedom to choose initiatives and pursue issues based solely on our own best judgment and guided by Canadian values and interests writ large. Our bet, we think, seems to be working. Government officials, ambassadors, media, and other leading public and private sector actors around the region and now in parts of Europe recognize the Council as a primary and sometimes the only independent interlocutor, interpreter, and thought leader in the region for Canada and Canadian perspectives. We invite all of you to join with us in our work. Now, about tonight's program. Many of you have attended our previous galas and know that we generally feature Latin American presidents, and we've certainly had many of them in this podium before. But this year, we're focusing on leading Canadian voices from the private sector and the government. Why? Because we think it is critical and past due for Canadians to discuss how the tectonic shifts in geopolitics, democratic values, technology, and of course the climate crisis, among others, will affect Canada's relationships and leverage in the region, and to develop flexible strategies to manage and benefit from those dynamics. We suggest that these conversations must extend well beyond tinkering with well beyond the traditional toolbox of more trade agreements and liberal democracy promotion or sustainability programs. They're all good for sure, but they and the folkloric stories we sometimes tell ourselves about Canada's standing in the region won't get us there. In fact, reliance on them will leave us further behind and with less leverage than we have now. What does it mean, for example, that both Canada and Latin America will increasingly play an outsized role in strategic minerals and food security? And how does that square with the strategy to decouple and de-risk from China, the country now that is deeply embedded in Latin America in many critical sectors, including strategic minerals and food? And on Canada's bread and butter foreign policy file, liberal democracy building and strengthening, what does it mean that various political actors in one of the most democratic regions in the world over the past several decades feel that they have been given license and a roadmap to mimic the undemocratic behaviors they see elsewhere, including, and sometimes particularly, our neighbor to the south? Tonight, we are honored that Ms. Nancy Southern will accept our award this year for Lifetime Business Achievement in the Americas. Under her leadership, ATCO has achieved an inspiring level of success in numerous industries and in numerous countries in the Americas. Her and ATCO's success is in many ways a guide for navigating the shifting circumstances in the Americas that we will be discussing here tonight. Now, to present our award to Nancy, I call on one of our esteemed board members and a longtime friend and collaborator of Nancy's, someone who really doesn't need an introduction and likely won't stick to script, the Honourable Scott Brison.
Great to see all of you here tonight, and thank you, Ken and Marta, for all that the CCA does to keep Canada engaged with the key actors and focused on the issues and opportunities for Canada in the Americas. Did I get that right, Ken? Okay, good. That's the last thing you gave me that I'm going to actually speak up using your notes. I'm a textual deviant. Someone got that. Oh, Tim Murphy. Yeah, I knew you'd get that. Look, I'm honored, and I'll be uncharacteristically brief in honoring Nancy Southern tonight on behalf of CCA and on behalf of all of us. We are celebrating Nancy's leadership in Latin America, but before that, I'd like to reflect on Nancy as a person, as a friend, as somebody I admire, and somebody I look up to. Canada's business community is the most progressive business community in the world. And some of the best Canadian companies, in terms of leadership that really improves the lives of others, are multi-generational family companies with a purpose and on focusing on doing what is best for customers, but also communities and for Canada. And no family does it better than the Southerns. And Ron and Marg, in their generation, laid a foundation that Linda and Nancy and their families continue to build on to improve the lives of others in Alberta and across Canada, and now in the Americas. Leading by example for over 75 years, ATCO has really exemplified corporate social responsibility and ESG before those acronyms were being thrown around. And nobody exemplifies corporate citizenship better than Nancy Southern. Now, make no mistake about it, Nancy is also a results-driven CEO, and over a 30-year period, ATCO's long-term returns have bested Berkshire Hathaway's. So ATCO's shareholders have done well, while ATCO has done good, enabling prosperity and opportunity for its customers, its employees, and the communities it serves. And again, ESG and the movement around greater purposeful corporate leadership is something that we in Canada, and certainly our bank, BMO, takes very seriously. But way before that, long before people were talking that talk, Nancy was really walking the walk. And whether it's from partnering with Indigenous Canadians to economically empower and create economic reconciliation in communities, or building one of the most diverse leadership teams of any company in Canada at ATCO. And forgive me for a moment, but it is Pride Month. And Nancy's leadership in Canada and in corporate Canada has done a lot and sets a real example for diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I started my business career and political career back in the 1990s, there were a lot of barriers for people like me. Not all of them were written out, but it was a challenge. You see, I was gay, and in fact, I still am. But Nancy, no, I know I always make François-Philippe feel a little uncomfortable sometimes because he doesn't know what I'm going to say next, and nobody does. But Nancy, I've never told you how much it means to me today and over the years to be able to work with and partner with your senior leadership, which includes people like me, and people you mentored and inspired and to whom you gave a chance. Nancy's exceptional leadership as a CEO has inspired and helped break down barriers for Canadian women in business and, in fact, politics. Nancy was the first woman on the board of BMO and is an honorary director of BMO. Now, speaking of politics, I could always count on Nancy when I was in government to get good advice as a minister. And I mean that because the advice was always informed by Nancy's passion for Canada and her rare combination of an understanding of government and business. François-Philippe is another rarity in that sense because he is an elected official who understands we have a market-based economy, which I think is a good thing. Sorry. But Nancy's unique understanding of both business and government has enabled her to make an invaluable contribution to Alberta, to Canada, and to the countries that ATCO serves, including in Latin America. Nancy's a learner. She's got an innate curiosity, open to ideas, and she's also got the courage to pursue opportunities in uncharted places globally. And that curiosity and courage are hallmarks of Nancy's leadership in Latin America. Leadership, I would add, that in two of the most important sectors for the future of our hemisphere, energy and infrastructure. Nancy is, to quote the late, great Tina Turner, simply the best. She is Finally. Thank you, François-Philippe. I appreciate that. It's a tough crowd. She's exactly the kind of leader that Canada and the world need more of. She is thoughtful, kind, respectful, reasonable, smart, and purposeful. And when you think of how much Nancy has accomplished from her place in the private sector, her leadership role, imagine for a moment what Nancy could accomplish as a leader in government. Now, I know I'm supposed to honor you, Nancy, but I got to tell you, and I think there'd be a lot of support in this room, this would be a great setting to launch your political career. And I mean, here at the Four Seasons in Yorkville, the epicenter of middle-class Canada, I used to, you know, Trudeau's cabinet was our plan for the middle class and those working hard to join it. You know, BMO Wealth, BMO Capital Markets, our plan for the middle class and those scared to death of joining it. So I've had to adjust a little bit. Sorry. But Nancy, and Nancy, you're a hell of a lot younger than Joe Biden. Sorry, not to pick on Joe Biden, that seems unfair. Nancy, on behalf of this CCA, in fact, on behalf of everybody in this room, and if I may say on behalf of Canadians, thank you for your service to Canada and to the world. On behalf of Max and me and Rose and Claire, who you'll see in Spruce Meadows in September, thank you for your friendship. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me in welcoming to the stage the recipient of the Canadian Council of America's Lifetime Business Achievement Award, Nancy Southern.
I told you he'd go off script. This is an artwork called Magic Hour by the artist Nikotai Samayuali of the community of women artists in Cape Dorset Island in Nunavut.
Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. Kenneth, thank you so much, very much. You are the vision behind what is required to bring solidarity throughout the Americas. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of the people of ATCO, but all Canadians in recognizing the importance of being an America, not just individual countries in South, North, and the Caribbean of America. I really, really respect and value and treasure everything that you have done. John Hausman, Marta. Marta, you are extraordinary, and the board of the Canadian Council of the Americas, all of your team. Thank you for doing what you're doing. There's so many familiar faces in the room tonight, and many of you I haven't seen in quite some time. And I can't begin to tell you how honored I truly am to receive this recognition and to have all of you here tonight. I'm humbled, and I must say that this award is not mine. It really is because of all of the terrific, extraordinary people that I have the privilege to work with. It belongs to so many. It should be shared because it has been earned by thousands of ATCO people, past and present, courageous women and men who traveled the world in the pursuit of excellence. And of course, I grew up with many of them. I spent my lifetime working alongside of them, and many are here with me tonight. I want to especially thank Hector Rangel for traveling all the way from Mexico. Hector has been a great coach, mentor, and advisor to us in Mexico. And also Pierre Honouree, our former ambassador of Canada to Mexico. Pierre, your work, Your Excellency, has been extraordinary on behalf of all Canadians, and I want to thank you specifically for your help, your mentorship, your great advice for ATCO as well. I also want to share this award with my incredibly supportive family. My husband, Jonathan, who's here, my son, Ben, and his partner, Taylor, who've traveled to be here tonight, my daughter, Kelly, and my son, Kyle, who are back at home, and of course, my mom and dad. My mom, still with us, more than 75 years ago with my father, started a new-to-the-world industry. They developed a novel solution to house Alberta's early resource pioneers, creating purpose-built, relocatable, and durable housing for workforces in remote areas. And together, they grew a little trailer company, the Alberta Trailer Company, into a global enterprise. And it is on their collective behalf, all of those that I've mentioned, that I accept this award. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for the great honor. If I could just say a few words about the current era that we find ourselves in and the importance of the Council of the Americas for Canada. Intensifying economic and geopolitical competition is right at our doorstep. Your efforts in the Council to promote Canadian interests in Latin America have become more vital than ever. And there is little doubt that we are all experiencing a profound restructuring of global economies. And we felt it firsthand across our international operations in ATCO. And in the wake of the pandemic, Russia's invasion, governments are embracing industrial policies focused on friendshoring and supply chains, strengthening relationships with neighboring nations, and reducing our dependence on autocratic regimes. Like the US, Canada has sparked conversations and the potential for reshoring overseas production and manufacturing, and for establishing more robust supply chains within North America. But far too often, lost in these political deliberations is the need for a cohesive vision for our relationship with Central and South America and the Caribbean. And I believe we ignore these relationships at our peril. As North America's attention has become more inwardly focused, China has been active and aggressively investing in Latin America to secure resources, grow its markets, and expand its political influence, all under the guise of economic benevolence. Today, China is the foremost trading partner for South America, and it is a major source of foreign direct investment. Since 2005, and I think you might find this an astonishing statistic, China's two main policy banks have provided more than $140 billion in loan commitments to Latin America and state-owned enterprises in those countries. That is more than the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the CAF Development Bank combined. Chinese companies have built bridges in Panama, highways in Argentina, ports in Peru. They own lithium production in Bolivia and Argentina, copper mines in Peru, gold mines and oil production in Colombia. They've been buying up soy growing land in Brazil, electrical infrastructure, be it generation, transmission, or distribution throughout the continent. Whether through financing, acquisition, or procurement, China has secured preferential access to a wellspring of critical commodities and infrastructure needed to compete and win in a transforming world. But of greater concern is China's growing influence on the region's fragile democracies. Its ability to co-opt these young republics to advance China's interests on the world stage should be concerning to each and every one of us. Meanwhile, back here in Canada, as our industries seek to develop our nation's equally coveted resources and secure the resiliency of Canadian supply chains and energy, we are stymied by and have to navigate through increasingly complex regulatory environments. So indeed, Canada's inability to advance major resource and infrastructure projects here at home brings fresh urgency to reasserting our engagement with Latin America for critical minerals and energy, where Canadian can-do determination and know-how can and should make such a positive impact in the region. Canadian businesses, with our commitment to transparency, respect for human rights, world-class environmental performance, and adherence to the rule of law, offers a viable, and I dare say, a welcomed alternative or partner in Latin American and Caribbean countries. Our model of engagement is one that we can be so proud of. We need to cheer for our industries. And in doing so, we can make a lasting contribution to sustainable development in the hemisphere, while also securing reliable access to the minerals and resources that will underpin our future growth. But more importantly, we can help maintain the balance of power that truly benefits Latin American people and democratic institutions for this generation and many generations to follow. At ATCO, we are committed to demonstrating we are worthy partners in Latin America's development of resources and infrastructure, whether it's through our 17 port facilities and port services businesses in Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil, or our modular structures factories in Chile and Mexico, which continue to provide turnkey workforce housing for major resource projects, hospitals in Guatemala, and affordable housing throughout the region. Or new opportunities in hydrogen and renewable energy. And I have always believed that commerce is the forerunner of prosperity, and it is the Arbeiter of diplomacy. It is the courage of industry and our willingness to take risks, build relationships, and strike out abroad that paves the way for formal engagement by the body politic. And so, to all of you gathered here this evening, I believe it is our shared duty to seize this moment and forge stronger bonds with our Latin American and Caribbean neighbors and friends. Let's embrace this opportunity right in front of us to reassert our leadership in the Americas with unwavering determination. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here to do an introduction to Minister Champagne. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to the CCA. Everyone in this room is very well aware of the Minister's steady rise in government through his successful handling of critical files. His bio is found in our Gala program, so I won't get too much into detail on those. But we here at the CCA have had the pleasure of collaborating with the Minister since he was first appointed to Cabinet in 2017 as Minister of International Trade and then of Global Affairs. We've greatly appreciated his candor and willingness to engage with the private sector to find solutions, likely a big reason why he's now Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. A file that involves directly or indirectly the major themes of our day and our future, Canada's and indeed the world's. He is, in our opinion, the ideal government official to present a vision and practical steps for how Canada should respond to the rapidly changing economic and geopolitical supply chain dynamics in the Americas and the race for more innovation and technological advances. It is my pleasure to welcome Minister Champagne to the stage to deliver his keynote remarks entitled Prosperity and Supply Chain Resiliency in the Americas. Minister Champagne, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Thank you very much. Buenas tardes, buonasera. Don't know, Ken, in how many languages you want me to go tonight? The good thing I see, I'm not the only champagne you're going to have tonight, so that's already a good thing to celebrate our friend Nancy. Listen, before I get even into the wonderful speech that they prepared, you know me, I'll go a bit off mark. If you want the original version, we'll email it to you for free. But I can assure you that there's a lot for us to talk about tonight. But the first thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you to all the firefighters. Many have come from the Americas. We had our friends from the United States, Mexico, Chile, and Costa Rica. And thank you for thanking them, because I think it's the proper way to start. Ken, you were talking with Scott as to what we can do in the hemisphere. Well, one thing we can do is to be there for each other. And I think that the fact that our friends from the United States, Mexico, Chile, and Costa Rica have heard our call and have been there and sending firefighters is a great sign of our friendship. Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Évidemment, c'est un grand plaisir d'être avec vous ce soir. Merci au Conseil canadien pour les Amériques de m'avoir invité. C'est un grand honneur d'être avec vous, évidemment un grand plaisir, surtout pour parler d'avenir et d'ambition, et vraiment de célébrer notre amie Nancy Southern. Marta, I want to say thank you to you. You said nice things about me, but if you saw, I could go on and on about you, so, you know, you've been an amazing partner, and I just want to say to the whole team who have been organizing tonight, but also have been fostering relationship, why don't we give them a big round of applause, all of them, because they really deserve that, because Ken and the team, I want to say, there's a lot going on in the world, and for you to be able to gather such a distinguished crowd, I must say tonight, is amazing. And next time, please send me the draft speech of Scott Brison. We'll help him with his speech. First and foremost, I want to pay tribute to my friend. I think I can say my friend Nancy. By the way, Nancy and I are going to be on stage tomorrow again, but I cleared that with her husband, so he's fine with that. 2 nights in a row. Tomorrow evening is Edmonton, if I recall. Yeah, we're going to be in Edmonton tonight. Tomorrow, we're in Toronto tonight, Edmonton. But I just want to say, I think I can say my friend Nancy Southern. Yes, okay, now it's good. We've cleared that. I want to say to my friend Nancy, because I think Scott did a perfect job, but I just want to say for all in the room today, you're a true leader. But more than that, you have been an inspiring business leader to many, many women, and I've heard that. But also you've been a trailblazer when it comes to First Nation and the role of women in business. And even someone mentioned when we were in the cocktail that you've been on the list, I think, for 18 years as the top women CEO in the country, or part of that list. Nancy, I just want to say, I cannot think of anyone more deserving, and I choose the word purposely, deserving, of this Lifetime Business Achievement Award. You make our country proud. You make all of us proud. So with that, Nancy, I think it's only... We really need more of Nancy Southern, so thank you for inspiring so many people to lead, and your leadership has been inspiring to many, but also I think I saw the time you took to speak to different women who were here tonight, and I just could see the person that you are, and it's great to be here. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I think they've asked me to talk to you about the future, and I would even say our future. I think it was Juan Manuel Santos, the former president of Colombia, who said once, if you go around South America, you will find that 80% of the time you're discussing the past and only 20% about the future. So tonight, in the spirit of President Santos' plea for a better balance between the past and the future, allow me to focus on our future. Most people who are looking at geopolitics today, and I assume it's most of you in the room, and if you look at economic affairs, you will find that there are 3 things which are top of mind of leaders around the world. And that is true whether you're going in Santiago, whether you're going in Mexico City, whether you're going in Washington, whether you're going Tokyo, Seoul, you name it. There's 3 things top of mind to all head of states, head of governments, and I would say business leaders. The first one is food security, energy security, and supply chain resiliency. And I'll make the case for you tonight that I think Canada stands out in a world where these challenges are top of mind to all leaders. And if you want to say, is that true? I was with the CEO, I shall remain nameless, of one of the largest IT company in the world. I won't tell you the city because now you're going to figure out who I'm talking about. But he said, Minister, you know how much time we spend on our board meeting about geopolitics these days? 40% of our time. Because he said the wrong decision on geopolitics can cost billions. And therefore, obviously, we need to pay a lot of attention with what's going on. And I think that it's true and fair to say that we live in a world and an era of great challenges. There's war in Europe, raging as we speak tonight. And if you look at geopolitical tensions in many parts of the world, whether you're looking at Asia or even in the Middle East, we're living in the world of high inflation. Just ask our friends in Germany, for example, or even in the UK, and population having to face high inflation. And we obviously live in a world of a climate crisis. If anyone needed a reminder, just look at the image that we saw this week of whether you're talking about Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, which I think last week was ranked one of the most polluted city in the world. And if you look at the image of New York, Washington, and Chicago, you realize that even our southern friends realize that there's a forest on the north, and that, by the way, we are in this together. And this togetherness is probably the sense of purpose, of mission that we should all have together. But the world is also going, I will put it to you, transformational change. I would put it to you that all rules of globalization are shifting. And Nancy and I will talk about after a number of things. But my perspective, I think you see these global supply chains which are going from global to regional. You're seeing as well massive global investment reshuffle happening. Just look at the production of vaccines. Look at the production of semiconductors. The words of President Biden when he was in the House of Commons, mentioning that for the US to be reliant on semiconductor, they need to work with Canada, because actually we have the largest packaging and testing facility in North America, happens to be on north of the border. And I would say the third thing that people are facing is that businesses are seeking safer and more predictable market. I think we live in a world where people are looking more for or favoring resiliency over pure efficiency. And I would even add stability, predictability, and the rule of law is in high demand and short supply. And I think, you know, we can all relate to example of moments where we cherish these values. That is true to our close friends and allies in Europe and Asia, obviously. And you know, the Prime Minister, I was with him in our recent trip in Asia. But these massive shifts are also having a profound effect here in the Americas. And in time like this, I would put it to you that you want Canada. You want Canada as a friend. You want Canada as a partner. You want Canada as an ally. So we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared to adapt. But most importantly, I would put it to you, is that we have to be prepared to seize the generational opportunities that are before us, because they are truly unprecedented. So a world of great challenges, but also a world of great opportunities that we need to seize, because they come once in a generation. And I would put it to you that we are that generation who's seeing these opportunities in front of us. Opportunity in the green economy. Just look what's been happening in Canada recently. Just look about the battery ecosystem. We started very far, and we're second now in the world, according to Bloomberg, for the battery ecosystem we've built in our country. We see opportunities in making our supply chain more resilient. When you think about the Americas and the opportunities that we have in Nancy and many of your businesses have seen that. You talk about critical minerals, which I will touch upon in a minute. But just think about the fact that we can increase our resiliency if we work more together, and opportunities in working more closely together with strong, strategic, like-minded partners. And that, I would say, is probably our best avenue for long-term stability, and I would say prosperity. Just last month, I was in Washington, D.C. for the first ever, imagine that, the first ever North American Semiconductor Conference. With the U.S. and our friends from Mexico, we are looking at ways how we can strengthen and secure the supply chain for semiconductors in North America. And I know we have our friends of IBM there, somewhere in the room, which I saw. Yes, you know, the MOU we signed and the president saying that, that's a good example. That was a catalyst. And someone told me in Washington, it's the first time that I hear Canada and semiconductor in the same phrase. Well, I said, that's about time, because we have the largest factory on this side of the border. But this is the type of things that we need to do more. That's just one example of continental allies working together to secure critical elements, I would say, of geostrategic value. And we need to do more of that, much, much more. And I think, Nancy, you've been a precursor in trying to see opportunities when we're looking at the Americas. And I can tell you, Marta, you didn't say that, but I happen to have been foreign minister as well at some stage. And I can say to all the ambassadors here, many are serving, those who have served before, people from our civil service. I just want to say thank you, and obviously the ambassador of all the countries in the region. Thank you for serving, for those who have served Canada, and thank you to all of the others who have brought and served here in Ottawa. Because you will recall that at the time I was one of those, you remember at some stage I was fighting for us to get a seat on the UN Security Council. And I was looking at other nations and other blocs. By the way, it's not in the speech, so don't tweet that immediately, I may get in trouble. When we were fighting to make sure that Canada would be there, there was also a moment where I was looking all these blocs voting together. And I remember being in a car very late at night and said, why are we not more structured in the Americas to make sure that our voices are heard collectively? We think of each other individually. What about us collectively? And the power that we would have if we were to align more in terms of our interests, in terms of what we can bring to the world. Just let me give you another example. Obviously, critical minerals is something we're going to be talking about because that's one big opportunity. By next year, the total mineral demand for clean energy technology will likely triple, if not quadruple. And we all know that there can be no energy transition without critical minerals. And if you think about the opportunity, as speaker before me, I think, Ken, you were saying that, think about that opportunity. Where do you find the critical minerals to power the world, the economy of the 21st century? You find them in the Americas. You need the critical minerals for the batteries. You're going to need the critical minerals for the semiconductor. You're going to need the critical minerals, obviously, to prosper in the 21st century. But just look at, considering that Latin America and the Caribbean account for. We just did like a small study just to look at the numbers. Over half of the world lithium is in the Americas. Almost 40% of the world copper is in the Americas. And a quarter of the world's nickel is in the Americas. Now, it's easy to understand as the economist, and I think we have some friend from the economists in the room, Ken, recently put it, the green transition could be continent changing. And I certainly believe that, because if we were to do more and certainly aligning ourselves and presenting ourselves to the world as one when it comes to powering the needs of the economy of the 21st century, I think we can win big. I don't think I need to remind anyone in this room tonight that Latin America is a large, diverse, and multifaceted region. And despite all the good that's going on, there are some neighborhoods in the region which have tough quarters. In some places, you've seen it, democracy remains under strain and certainly under threat. In others, we've seen the rule of law becoming less predictable as property rights give way to the whims of nationalistic tendencies. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to advise. I'm not here to lecture. I'm not here to tell anyone or any country on what they should do or not. But I will say this, for those of us who share similar values, we have a generational opportunity to do more together. And let me be very clear, whether you're in mining, and I know there's a lot of mining folks in the room tonight because I've met many of you. Yeah? Now let me see if the folks of banking are in the room. Okay. I see the banker are more discreet, huh? And there are some folks with pension fund. Okay, well, now you see that. Imagine today, if you're doing business in the Americas, you would probably agree with me that Canada should be your partner of choice. And certainly we should build on that. So looking to the future, we need to ask ourselves a few questions that I think we can work together. And Ken is going to do a lot of work with the team to try to answer some of these questions as we go forward. How do we do better to integrate a continent? That's a question that we've been asking ourselves, I would say, for quite some time. How do we seize the opportunities of the green economy of the 21st century? How do we make our supply chain more resilient? How do we ensure that democracies are strong and sustainable in the hemisphere? Because we know that democracy means security, it means prosperity, and it also means possibilities. And just think about all the young people in all the countries of the Americas which are hoping for us to do more together to provide them possibilities and opportunities. These are all the areas where I think Canada can and must play a key role now and certainly in the future. Why? I would say because never have been so convinced that the Americas need to approach both the challenges and the opportunities together. Indeed, I certainly believe that Canada can be a force of positive influence to help the America reach their full potential. Just look at a few numbers that will make our ambassadors smile, because many of them in our civil service have been part of doing that for Canada. 8 of the 15 trade agreements are with countries in the hemisphere. Think about that. 8 of the 15 free trade agreements of Canada are with partners in the region. Bilateral trade with the region now totals more than $85 billion. Just think about that, $85 billion, and how can you plot that for the future, thinking that we have what the world needs for the 21st century. Latin America and the Caribbean is home to more than 20% of total Canadian overseas investment, which represent almost half of all Canadian mining assets in the world. Talk about influence, talk about opportunities, talk about us having a positive influence in the region. This really allows Canada to position itself as a key player and a partner across the region. A key partner economically, a key partner politically, and I would say a key strategic partner for the future. So in conclusion, because believe it or not, this was supposed to be short, let me come back to President Santos' words and the future. The future belongs to the Americas if we so choose. The future then belongs to us if we so choose. The future belongs definitely to those who are looking forward with confidence and vision rather than regret the past. So ladies and gentlemen, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious, and let's make the Americas a leader in the economy of the 21st century. Merci, mesdames et messieurs. Merci d'avoir été là ce soir. Bonne soirée à tous.
As Ken said at the very outset of this evening, we thank you so very much for being here and for making this event, our first live event since 2019, so engaging. We are here as Canadians speaking to Canadians, and we really feel at CCA that we're trying to convene a conversation about the Americas, but also Canada's role in the Americas. And we're very blessed really to have, from the highest levels of government and business, two parties to that discussion that I think need to be had. What I'd like to do is really pick up on comments you made, Nancy, in your remarks, which is really about the moment we're in politically right now in the Americas. And that is a moment where large emerging market countries, like elsewhere in the world, are increasingly becoming geopolitical swing states. They will have more transactional relationships with both East and West, more particularly China and the United States. And that presents a very different geopolitical environment, as the Minister mentioned, in which to operate. And so I guess my question is, how do we ensure that Canada and Canadians and other liberal democratic nations are the ones that are financing the future of the vision that the Minister laid out for the Americas? In other words, how do liberal values drive economic value in the region? Let me start with you, Nancy.
Oh, Jonathan, I am sure that my friend, the Minister, spends many, many nights thinking about this question that you asked. As we speak, Ursula von der Leyen is in Brazil and purposely doing a tour of Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Mexico. And her policy advisor actually commented that they have ignored, for the most part, their attention on the region. And the Chancellor of Germany also just finished a tour of South America. I think we need to be conscious and deliberate about our stance as a country in terms of support. And I believe the Prime Minister demonstrated that in the Three Amigos meeting in Mexico recently. But we need a much bigger presence. We need it from industry and we need it from the body politic as well. We need a much bigger presence. Obviously, Canada and the US are not going to invest the way China invests in the region. However, I believe the body politic needs to champion our industries in Canada to a much higher degree. and stand up for the advantages Canadian business brings to the region. I think that is a very important aspect of making sure that we can maintain that balance of power and that the autocratic regimes don't take over that balance.
Thank you, Nancy. So, Minister, the government has recently put a lot of focus on Indo-Pacific for good reason. And one wonders, given Nancy's comments and some of the remarks that were made earlier in the evening, is it a time to elevate an America's strategy in the same manner that we have, as a country, elevated an Indo-Pacific strategy?
Sure, and obviously, I'd let Minister Joly in that, every foreign minister is focusing on many things. The world is going very fast, as Nancy said. But I think what we did in Asia Pacific is a good blueprint. If I had a dream, I would go in one of these big planes, probably a Bombardier, to do a Team Canada, to kind of reshore that kind of sentiment. When I was foreign minister, I always said, and even before that, just look at the pandemic. I mean, you may know or not, but during the Second World War, Canada, the boat that resupplied all the Caribbeans during the Second World War. And when you look back and you say, there must be more for us to be doing together. I mean, the Caribbean to start with, just if you split kind of the region, you say the Caribbean, that's an obvious place for Canada to be. I mean, historically, the people-to-people tie, the fact that many of us have come from the Commonwealth. I mean, there's so many reasons that this needs to be within, I would say, our sphere of influence and really be engaged as we have always been historically. Obviously, NAFTA is helping us with our friends in Mexico, but even there, when I was saying it was the first summit on semiconductor, and think about that, if we don't cooperate on semiconductor, what are we going to do together? Because that's the key element of prosperity for the future. I think we have a golden opportunity, if my dream cannot come true as quickly as I wish, is there's one lying nugget there, which is critical mineral. The alternative to we're the only country in the West which has all the critical mineral in Canada. Now, if you couple that with the refining capacity and everything you've already done in many parts of South America, you become a powerhouse. And when you insert yourself, I always say smartly, in the strategic supply chain of energy, you are a player at every table. Because you go back to energy security, food security, and supply chain resilience. If we can play in that, I think that we could do a great service. But like I said, my dream would be to take a big plane and to make sure that we do this Team Canada, just like the president is doing, because I think our friends there are wanting us to be more present. It reminds me, it's like in Washington. You never go too often in Washington because everyone goes and you're there for an hour and then something else comes up. But I think if you think about South America in particular, I mean, some of the countries are integrated with us to the TPP. Thanks God, this was probably one of the most consequential decisions you mentioned about China. I remember a former deputy minister, which I will name one day in the book, said, Minister, of all the decisions that have been taken by the government, thanks God that you pushed for the CPTPP, because just think about what it did for the Asia-Pacific region, although we have Peru and Chile, which are part of the TPP. But I think these trade agreements are enabling, but what we need to do, and Nancy and I, maybe it's going to be part of our mission, is to bring all the SMEs to realize the potential. Because demography is destiny. As a country of 38 million people, you have to look beyond that. And as the country in the world, the only G7 who has a free trade with all the other G7, think about the opportunities also for these countries in clean technology, in hydrogen, in critical minerals. But you're quite right, and I'll stop there, that if we don't do it, there's others who are going to take our place.
Right.
And I think that's why when I say challenges and big opportunities, I always look on the bright side and I say that's a huge opportunity, but we need to scale, we need to do it quickly, and we need to do it permanently.
Thank you. There's competition of all kinds. So we live in the era of the IRA, which is, created.
Tell Stellantis.
Yes. No.
No, it was an inside joke for Stellantis. There's nobody of Stellantis in the room.
But it is a monumental piece of legislation, probably more important than the Highways Act of 1956. So it is creating a sucking sound of investment and focus from Europe, from Canada, and from the rest of the world. I guess the question is, how do we ensure, based on a vision of the economic future for the Americas, that what could be a made in America scenario becomes a made in the Americas scenario? What are the steps, Minister, to make a vision that is responsive to that challenge? Or
Do you want to go
whomever wants to go first.
I'm your +1 tonight, so you go first.
Nancy, please go first. And I also say, because I think it's particularly relevant to your company and to your work, is how do you then select the partners? How do you select the CapEx decisions that are made, given that there is this reality that they're underwriting a transition in energy, and it's a very big checkbook?
It's a very big checkbook, Jonathan, you're absolutely right. And it is attracting tremendous investment and tremendous excitement and engagement in the US marketplace. And with all due respect to my friend, and the most wonderful minister over these past umpteen years, almost a decade, we talk a lot about doing things. We're not very good at actually getting them started. Critical minerals, we've talked about.
You can applaud.
Critical minerals, we know we have aplenty. Countries all over the world would give their eye teeth to be Canada. But I was talking to a friend of mine tonight. 3, possibly 4 years to get permit and license for a lithium mine in the United States. 10 to 15 years for permit and license for a mine in Canada. We have to sort this out. We have to get our house in order at home. We have so much regulatory complexity that doesn't, even if we had the IRA, and actually my compliments to the government for a terrific budget to incent the energy transition and all kinds of new opportunities. It's terrific, but we still have to sort out the regulatory complexity. And the regulators need to have mandates to actually move towards a cleaner future. Having said that, if we can do that at home, my feeling is what's happening is a lot of Canadian industries are saying we've had to do it at home. We're really good at it, perhaps the best in the world, if not the best in the world, in resource development and energy innovation. So we're going elsewhere. But as I said in my comments, business is the arbiter for diplomacy. If we go together, if we come up with a strategy together to invest, champion, and demonstrate to the governments of the region that we are here and we're here to stay, we are going to be a worthy partner in the future, and we are much stronger together. It's a great message.
Totally.
But we have to demonstrate the commitment.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, sure. Nancy is right, as always. And even her husband is smiling. But I would say one thing, in the world of our way, Canada wins. And I'll tell you something that for me, when I go to Washington, I always say, you know, in the world of the IRA and the CHIPS Act, I always say to my American friend, if you all assume that the underlying principle is resiliency, Canada has to be part of the equation for the United States to be resilient. And in that sense, I can tell you a number of examples. Recently, just look at Volkswagen. And I was at the forefront of that. By the way, in the book, that started with one phone call. And a year after, we got the first gigafactory of Volkswagen outside of Germany. And we were competing with the world. and we won it in St. Thomas. And I'll tell you why we won. Yesterday, the CEO of Rio Tinto, Jakob Swartz, was with me in Saguenay. The first smelter to be open in the Western world in 12 years, the last one was in Iceland, is going to be open in Saguenay in Quebec. That's going to be the largest, I think we can say to Canada, that's going to be the greenest smelter. And Saguenay, not my words, his word to Reuters, is going to be the largest production site of aluminum in the Western world. That's Canada of the 21st century. And in that world, I would say we win. We win for 5 reasons. And Nancy is right that we need to do better. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at, for example, BHP, they decided to put their potash mine to double down on Canada. And tomorrow, Nancy and I are going to host the board of Dow Chemical, which when I called Jim in Midland, I said, Jim, you need to have your board meeting because they have a huge project in Fort Saskatchewan. He said, Minister, anytime, I'll bring the whole board in Canada because we want to double down our investment in Canada. So my perspective is always when you talk to global CEOs, I go back to my thing, stability, predictability, and the rule of law, and looking at the world where people can invest. Obviously, we look fairly attractive, but we can never win on the money. And I'm so happy there's banker and pension fund folks and people who would understand me when I say that, because I can never outcompete the United States. We're Canada. We're not the reserve currency of the world. 5 things that brings people to Canada. Talent. We're still the biggest magnet for talent. And I would say our immigration policy is making a huge difference to make sure we can bring people. The second thing I would say, the ecosystem. Find me a country in the world which has an aerospace industry, a biomanufacturing industry, a battery industry, a car industry, and a defense industry to come. We're not, I always say, we're not like an Australian of the Nord version. We're a small version of the United States. We're the 3rd largest manufacturer of cars if you take the Windsor-Detroit corridor in the world. Montreal is the 3rd largest city in the world to manufacture a plane. Then you look at the 3rd thing is around critical minerals, and proximity is everything. And that's why I want to work with our colleagues around the region, because if you talk to all the CEOs of the automaker, they say proximity. Proximity to resources, markets, and assembly line. That's why we can win as a region. I love my dear friends in other parts of the world, but they're too far from the markets. People make their money in the United States, at least for those, if you look at the auto industry and in Europe. And you could say China as well, but that's a different market. The 4th thing is renewable energy, and Nancy is a leader in that. People come here because they understand that we're going to move from electric car to a green car. And that has been my pitch. We're going to do green steel, green aluminum. I'm working on green plastics. We'll do green semiconductors. And that's how you can win, because the whole industry is going there. And lastly is access to market. And I think the fact that we have these trade agreements, when you talk to CFOs in the world, because I'm negotiating with many of them, if you put your plant in Canada, and assuming you're in the battery auto sector, you probably save 10% on import duties for machinery from Europe. These folks understand that. So I would say in a world of that, we need to prevent a race to the bottom. But as long as we're pari passu with the United States on subsidies, we win because of our people. We win because of our critical minerals. We win because we're Canada.
Can do.
Exactly, the can-do. The can-do is a great example which we need to do more together. Indeed. But this is the world, I think, where we need to seize. But I'll finish there, but that's why we need people like you. And you, Ken, I'm looking particularly because you're just in front of me. And I don't have glasses. Not everyone in the world wakes up to think about Canada. That's the one thing that I've learned in this job. We think we're big. But you go around the world, and I must say, when people in Tokyo and in Seoul talk to me about St. Thomas or Bécancour in Quebec, I know we're winning.
Great. You alluded to a race to the bottom, and we all want to avoid that. And so we, in this country, and now with renewed vigor in the United States post-Trump, hopefully not pre-Trump, we've seen a huge effort to move to renewables to essentially address the climate change challenge. There are some who say that the resiliency that you're talking about is actually being eroded in our energy system, that it's become increasingly fragile as a result of this very, very top-down process, which I guess when you're facing existential issues, politicians and policymakers need to get involved. But it's the first energy transition we've had on the planet, which has come from the top down and not from the bottom up, as was the 50s or 60s from coal to oil, for example. So it's going to be a bit jangly. I wonder, can you tell us a little bit about how this affects, Nancy, the way you think about your business? Because if the critics are right, there is an accident to happen. How do we avoid that?
I think we saw the beginnings of the accident occur as Russia invaded the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. There needs to be very deliberate, well thought out planning with energy transition, in my opinion. We have to take into consideration affordability. This is a huge transformation. It is a full capital stock turnover. And we have a lot of very good recent assets that are in the ground in all of our provinces and around the world that really somebody is going to have to pay for. And they could possibly be stranded. So I think we have to really think about that piece of the equation that hasn't been talked about. The other thing that we need to take into consideration is reliability. Wind doesn't always blow and sun doesn't always shine. In my own province, for example, in the month of December 2022, just a few months ago, 3 weeks we had greater than minus 20 degrees C for 3 weeks straight. The grid in Alberta is 15 gigawatts. Yep. Our peak capacity, our peak load was 12 gigawatts. For home heating, just for home heating and commercial residential use, we use the equivalent of 50 gigawatts of natural gas. Now, to replace that in the next 12 years, as is contemplated by the Clean Electricity Regulation, is not only next to impossible, it is feasibly unaffordable for the constituents in Alberta. Saskatchewan has much the same issue. And I know that Ontario here has a supply shortage. As you see all of the extraordinary development and investment, as you talked about the batteries, the auto corridor, the demand for electricity is increasing. Yeah. We can't build hydro anymore. We must build nuclear, but really there's no silver bullet. There's no silver bullet. We have to take into consideration all of the technologies, all of the innovation, and we have to have backup supply. As Europe quickly noticed, as soon as Russia cut off the gas supply, they were pretty much hooped and are now searching the world for backup energy that looks like fossil fuels to support the renewables and the other technologies. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember. Our climate goal of 2050 is net zero. Net means a plus and a minus. True. And you can't get zero. We have to be able to balance, and there has to be extraordinarily deep, honest, transparent dialogue amongst in the financial sector, the body politic, and industry about how we get there in an affordable, pragmatic fashion to achieve 2050. And if we don't, we are going to have supply shortages, blackouts, grid alerts, and a very, very costly economic input that is key to all economic development. If electricity isn't affordable, it is the #1 input in all manufacturing. All of the new technologies that we want to develop, we have to be very deliberate and conscious about how we go about this transition.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you. Now, there is a question from the floor.
Sure.
And I want to call upon Mauricio Celaya from there you are, EY. Please, go right ahead.
Thank you so much. So considering the geopolitical climate that we're in and also the transition towards net zero, we're now seeing that Canada is emerging as a potential global leader in critical minerals. The question I have for you is, do we have a strategy to be able to build a more robust and resilient supply chain? And also, what could we do to potentially future-proof Canada's global position in critical minerals, given the macro environment that we have today? Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Yeah, I'd say yes. First, let me just come back to what Nancy was saying, and I think always Nancy is clear-eyed as to the challenges and the opportunities. I would agree with you that electricity is key for our prosperity. As we speak, there's some project we have to say no to. Because, believe it or not, and I wish the Globe and Mail sometimes was with me when I negotiate, but not all the time. But the first question they ask me is not about subsidy. The first question people ask is, do you have the block of electricity? Because believe it or not, what you've seen recently, my phone is burning out of people who want to come to Canada. Because they all understand. By the way, if it's good for Volkswagen, trust me, it's good for about every CEO in the world. If they did 1 year of due diligence, the Germans, trust me, everyone said that must be good. And everyone wants to come. Now we need to manage. But to your point, and I'll come to the question of the gem, I think Nancy is right. I mean, case at point, the largest hydrogen plant in North America will be in Edmonton with Air Products that we brought Safi to invest with you.
ATCO.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're right. You're right.
Their products is half the size, and they're U.S., Francois.
I know. Well, you see, it's going to be great tomorrow evening when we're going to have this panel with Dow Chemical. We may have to. No, but it's great that we have the first hydrogen plant, I would say the largest in North America, will be in Edmonton. And I think other opportunities we were talking before around small modular reactor, which is also on the nuclear side where we can do, and certainly we have to look, because Canada, if you look on the nuclear side, for example, has a huge reputation around the world. We just came from Korea, for example, in the CANDU reactor, and even in Eastern Europe. So how can we do that also in the hemisphere? But to your question, sir, I come from a place called Shawinigan. That might not be some place you know. It's a small place. But at that time, my grandfather was cutting logs that we were putting on a river to sell to the United States. I think as a generation, we decided to be smarter in the sense that we just don't want to dig. We want to refine and create the largest value in Canada for you and future generation, because the easiest thing would be just make sure that we start digging and we ship it. But we want to refine, we want to build the batteries, we want to build the cars. That's, I think, the smart thing we do. What we need now is speed and scale. And I'll tell you from my perspective, there's a lot of resources, but to go back to your question, it's the first time, I think, at least that I've seen in my lifetime, that you have two industries that need to work together that never really work together. You have the auto industry and the mining industry. And we've been in the middle of that, because I know CEOs on both sides who call me. One wants long-term supply agreement for 20 years, the other would prefer spot market prices. And they call me to complain about each other. They say it's so unreasonable. And what we've been trying to do, and that's why you've seen like Rio Tinto yesterday, not only we did that, but we signed a 10-year MOU because they want not to double down on Canada, they want to triple down in Canada. That's why we're talking to some of the largest mining group in the world to say, how can you help us to make sure that we have speed and scale, that we have scattered resources around there, but if you want to meet the market demand, because when you're dealing with the auto sector, it's quite a special industry, the volumes you need are so big that we're trying to make sure that we use that to make sure that we can develop these resources. And as Nancy said, we need to get better on the permitting side. But one thing that the miners tell me, and I take it from their CEOs, they said, in Canada it's a bit slower, but in the US I get sued every day. So they said, on balance sometimes, they said, so that being said, we need to do far better, because this is a generational opportunity, not only for Canada. I want to go back to the purpose of where we are, but I think if the region was aligned in terms of being the supplier of choice to the world, at a time where people are trying to diversify their source of supply to meet the market demand of the 21st century. And people have assets in both Canada and Chile and Peru and Argentina. How can we do that better continentally? That, I think, would be a huge win. And I think would inspire the young generation because they'd see a future in themselves in the economy of the 21st century.
Nancy, I'm going to give you the last word.
No, tonight I was speaking with a young woman who is Canadian, but from Latin America, and as many of you are here today, and my good friends Hector and Pierre. I think we as industry leaders, what I would like to say is we have much of a diverse population in our businesses today, thanks to good immigration policy and attracting talent in Canada. We need to utilize these talented people better. We need to make sure that we're listening. They bring with them the knowledge of the culture, the boots on the ground. And oftentimes we overlook the value that they can add to our projects when we're looking to invest in Latin America. So I encourage all of my colleague business leaders here to really embrace the diversity that we have represented in our businesses today and take advantage of their tremendous talent.
Thank you. Nancy. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, thank you to our gala sponsors, our annual premium members. Again, open invitation to join with what we're doing. Thank you. We will hope to see you again next year.
Thank you, everyone. Merci.
Now, everyone. Yeah. I think we'll do a picture.
Thank you.